Vast, remote, breathtaking, and utterly unforgivable. The Australian outback stretches across the country, spanning 5.6 million square kilometres. It's beautiful, but it can be deadly. The outback has a long history of claiming the lives of those who venture out unprepared and unwise to the harsh environment. Other times, some unlucky souls have been claimed not by the elements, but by those who wish to cause harm. From a missing man who became the centre of a small outback town mystery, to a mother who was chased in the desert night by a carload of criminals, never to be seen again. What really happened to those who vanished in the red dust? Welcome back to another Shadow Sunday here on Shadow Matter, where I take a look at a darker side of our world with a focus on stories and cases from Australia and New Zealand, here every second Sunday. If you enjoy listening to horrific human tragedies on the commute to work, then feel free to check out my podcast. Search Shadow Matter on Spotify. Today's episode is all about the unsolved disappearances of the Australian outback. I came across a couple of these stories before and have always been intrigued about them. One of them I've already talked about way back when this channel first started. If you'd like to see that and have a laugh at my expense, video link in description below. Now, I've never personally had the pleasure of visiting the outback. To me, growing up and hearing stories from my old man and his adventures in back of Burke, the outback always seemed like some mystical fantasy fictional world, a vast world full of desert, a few plants, snakes, roos, and a plethora of stories. The outback has always intrigued me, and for many others like myself, it's become somewhat of a mythical place, sometimes growing in popularity for the wrong reasons. Think of movies like Wolf Creek, for example, that have in part frightened international visitors from ever stepping foot in the red dirt, but also inspired them to travel there.
I can tell you, and then I'd have to kill you.
I've done more than a few videos on the outback before, and they tend to be my most searched for videos on this platform. Actually, I've got a whole playlist dedicated to a darker side of the outback, so go and give that a watch after this. Most people who go missing are found within 48 hours. For those who go missing in the outback, especially in the more remote areas, it can probably take a little longer to be found. Generally, a lot of people who get lost in the outback do so because, well, they weren't prepared. Driving at night, not conserving fuel, the car breaks down and they wander off, making it damn near impossible to spot from the sky during an air search, that sort of thing. The other times? Well, the outback is a pretty big place, so it's very easy to hide bodies there, if you get what I mean. Case in point, the body of Peter Falconio, presumed dead, has never been found. Despite a massive court case and subsequent conviction, British tourist Peter Falconio was backpacking the world in 2001 with his girlfriend Joanne when tragedy struck them both on the Stuart Highway in the Northern Territory. The couple had come to Australia on a working holiday visa and finished working 6 months in Sydney. Peter and Joanne's plan was to do a big roadie of Australia, travelling through the Red Centre up to Darwin and then finishing their trip in Brisbane on the east coast. After securing the purchase of an orange VW Combi van, the pair began their journey. On July the 14th, 2001, Peter and Joanne visited Alice Springs and were heading north that night. After stopping at a roadhouse in Taitree, the couple continued their journey with Falconio in the driver's seat. At around 7:30 p.m, the couple were wary of a vehicle that had been following them since they left the roadhouse. The car, noted by Joanne as a white four-wheel drive Toyota with a green canopy, pulls up beside the Combi and gestures at the couple to pull over, indicating that there was a problem with their vehicle. Initially, Joanne was hesitant about pulling over, but Peter was perhaps a bit more confident and trusting. The driver was male and had a dog with him. Peter got out of the vehicle to talk to the other driver, who stated that he saw, quote, sparks flying out of your exhaust. Peter talks to the driver for a bit and then returns to the van and asks Joanne to start it up and rev the engine on his signal. She then heard a loud bang from the rear of the van, and moments later, the man was at the window brandishing a silver handgun. Next thing she knew, the gunman was threatening Joanne with the gun and forced her hands behind her back and cuffed them with cable ties. Joanne is then carried to the four-wheel drive and thrown in the back under the canopy. While the gunman is distracted outside, possibly moving the body, Joanne decides to make a run for it, albeit with her hands still secured behind her back. The gunman begins to stalk the bush, searching for Joanne. While she is hiding like a rabbit in the scrub, her attacker searches for a few hours in the area while Joanne is hunkered down, fearing for her life. He returns a few times with his vehicle and apparently even has his headlights pointing directly at her hidden location, but never manages to find her. Joanne stays hidden for 5 hours until about 1 a.m. She can no longer hear the four-wheel drive and braves it out onto the highway, where she flags down a road train. The driver of the road train initially helps Joanne search for her boyfriend, but upon learning that her attacker was carrying a gun, he decides it's best to drive to nearby Barrow Creek and call the police. Over the next 12 or so hours, police take Joanne's statement, take photos for evidence, and put about a dozen or so roadblocks on the main route leading to the state's borders. Police searches of the area, which included help from 4 Aboriginal trackers, found Joanne's footprints, a bloodstain on the side of the road, and disturbance marks in the gravel indicative of a vehicle's tyres. The combi van was found hidden some 80 metres away in the scrub. It took some time for the police to appreciate the significance of the crime. Media were quick to sensationalise the story, as the recent memory of the backpacker murders still lingered and whispered thoughts into the public consciousness. Inconsistencies in Joanne's story, as well as the lack of definitive detail in the police composite sketch or the confusion over the type of vehicle and the dog the gunman had, many were wondering if her story was at all real. Media shifted focus, and soon the story began to change from one of survival against all odds to doubt about Joanne Lees and her version of events. This caused a trial by media and public persecution. Headlines often espoused guilt on her part, and comparisons were made to Lindy Chamberlain, who was jailed in 1982 for the murder of her baby daughter Australiia in August of 1980, only for an inquest in 2012 to declare a dingo took her baby. Even the police looked closely at Lees as being involved in the crime. Before she left back home to England, Joanne was grilled in a 3-hour police interview.
I'll take you home if you ever let go of one. Can you help us with that? No. No, you really are scaring me. You think I did this, don't you?
No, but I have to ask if you've been involved.
No, I haven't been involved. Not at all. No. No.
A $250,000 reward was posted, but the only new evidence in the Falconio case was an unidentified male DNA trace on Lee's t-shirt and some related DNA on the cable ties and combi gear stick. In 2002, newly promoted Alice Springs Police Superintendent Colleen Gwynn assembled a team of highly dedicated and resourceful detectives to help solve the mystery. CCTV footage of a man fitting Lee's description was seen entering a service station in Alice Springs. The vehicle identified was a 4-wheel drive Toyota Land Cruiser with a green canopy. Unable to identify the number plate or the owner, the police were still in the dark about their mystery gunman. A breakthrough was desperately needed in the case. Gwynn tasked her team with finding a match for the DNA profile taken from Lee's t-shirt and the gear stick of the combi. At the time, there were 2,500 persons of interest, and near the top of the list was a diesel mechanic from Broome, known to police for outback drug running. He fitted Lee's description, and investigators had placed him in the area during the week of the attack. His name was Bradley John Murdoch. Murdoch also owned a white 4-wheel drive Toyota Land Cruiser with a green canopy and owned a dog. After coaxing Murdoch's brother to supply the police with DNA samples, a forensics expert found a match. The DNA from Lee's t-shirt was 150 quadrillion times more likely to have come from Murdoch than from someone else. Media were quick to hone in on Murdoch, and feeling the pressure, he fled using a small window of opportunity to escape. Police from all over Australia were on the lookout for Murdoch, and if he hadn't committed another crime, he may have gotten away with it. On the 28th of August 2002, the South Australian Police arrested him in the coastal town of Port Augusta, 300 kilometres northwest of Adelaide, for the suspected rape and abduction of a woman and her 12-year-old daughter. Superintendent Gwynn listened in via speakerphone as the police made their arrest. A trial ensued, and Joanne Lees flew back to Australia for the court case. Murdoch was eventually found guilty of deprivation of liberty, kidnapping and assault against Joanne Lees, and was also found guilty of the murder of Peter Falconio, despite the lack of a body. And this is a huge point of contention for the story. Many still believe Joanne Lees was somehow involved and that Bradley John Murdoch is innocent. A Channel 4 documentary titled Murder in the Outback, the Falconio Lees Mystery, released in 2020, points out inconsistencies in Joanne's story and runs with the narrative of Murdoch being innocent. While the doco may appear compelling to some, it should be noted that one of the investigators on this program is now the late disgraced ex-defense lawyer Andrew Fraser, who spent 7 years in prison for drug charges. Some of his clients were the Morans and the Pettingill crime family. Also, a lot of reviews of the documentary point out that it's completely biased and one-sided. Murdoch has maintained his innocence in the crime and is currently serving life in prison with a non-parole period of 28 years. Recently, Murdoch's health has taken a turn for the worse and he was diagnosed with terminal throat cancer. So, where is Peter Falconio's body? In recent years, media were quick to headline stories of a possible body found in the outback somewhere near Alice Springs. Bone fragments were found, but Northern Territory Police said the reports are, quote, factually incorrect, and a search is, quote, not currently being conducted. An anonymous letter was sent to NT News in 2017 claiming that Murdoch had cut Falconio's body up and placed it into 2 large bags. The letter claimed that an associate was asked to dissolve the remains in acid and dispose of them in the Swan River in Perth, but the associate had gone past Geraldton and buried the bags unopened in remote Western Australia. The NT News forwarded the letter to Northern Territory Police, who said they were reviewing the letter. A fresh appeal was made in 2021, 20 years after the murder, in hopes of shedding new light on the mystery. As of the date of recording this video, Peter Falconio's body or his whereabouts have never been found. Across Australia, an increasing number of people are being reported missing, a 17% increase in the last decade. According to figures from the Australian Federal Police, around 2,500 are classified as long-term missing. Their families, trapped in a terrible type of limbo, often referred to as ambiguous loss, unsure whether to grieve or maintain hope. This is certainly true for the people of the Pilbara region in Western Australia. Young men are going missing without a trace in the small communities of Indigenous Australians, and the reports of missing have increased in recent years. According to news articles from SBS and ABC, at least 6 young Aboriginal men have gone missing from different towns in Pilbara, and more have been reported in the Kimberley, all in a relatively short period. 2 of these young men vanished in the same month, just a week apart. Then 30 months later, their relative also disappeared. Wesley and Clinton Lockyer were young, healthy, and closely connected to their families in the Pilbara region. The first to go missing was Wesley in October 2022. He vanished from Jinparinya, a community of 9 houses just a short drive from the booming Pilbara industrial hub of Port Hedland. A week later, his cousin Clinton Lockyer, 30, went missing from the town of Roebourne, about 200 kilometres south. Their relative Zane Stevens also went missing on the coast north of Broome in April 2024. Brenton Shah was last seen on May 1, 2024 in Geraldton, and Wiley Oscar went missing from the Jinjawa Aboriginal community near Fitzroy Crossing in November 2022. Wesley went missing on Monday the 24th of October 2022 from his home address. Wesley left his address by unknown means, leaving all of his personal belongings behind. Wesley knows the land very well and is an experienced ranger. It is out of character for Wesley not to tell his family where he is going or not to be in regular contact. According to an article from thenightly.com.au, police initially dismissed the disappearance as a drug-induced walkabout. However, the family of Wesley say this is not the case because the 31-year-old was an experienced bushman. A week later, Wesley's cousin was last seen on the 31st of October 2022 when he went missing after attending an appointment in Roebourne. CCTV footage shows Clinton sitting outside an Aboriginal medical service where he collected medication that he took routinely for a mental health condition. That evening, he met up with a friend at a house in Shoal Street. He contacted his mother, Michelle, on the phone at around midnight, and she said that he sounded normal as anything. However, a few hours later, Clinton came by her house and knocked on her door, but before she could answer, he was gone. His bank account has not been touched and no one has heard anything. 4 days later, 22-year-old Wiley Oscar disappeared on November the 4th after his Toyota Land Cruiser was found with 2 flat tires north of Fitzroy Crossing in the Kimberley region. Wiley had recently returned from a camping trip with his family when an argument broke out. Wiley was a quiet young man who always tried to avoid confrontation, so he leaves the residence and took off in the first car he saw, the Land Cruiser. Family circulated the story of Wiley's disappearance among themselves and conducted searches before a breakthrough was made. The Land Cruiser Wiley had been driving was found abandoned on Brookings Springs Station. It had 2 flat tires and was still packed full of food and water which had been taken on the previous camping trip. Now, this was only a few kilometres outside of Fitzroy Crossing. Locals were surprised that the vehicle wasn't found sooner, as it was easy to spot from the road. Land and air searches were conducted with the help of emergency services, Indigenous trackers, family, and friends, but with no sign of Wiley. The search effort was formally suspended on November the 23rd. Wiley was an experienced stockman. It's uncharacteristic of him to wander off even if his car had broken down and not contacted his family. If he did have to lag it on foot, he was known to take supplies with him, but considering that Fitzroy Crossing was only a few kilometres away, was this foul play? The subsequent disappearances of Wesley, Clinton and Wiley were followed 18 months later by the case of Zane Stevens. The 21-year-old was last seen in Broome about 3 a.m. on April the 27th, 2024. His vehicle was found bogged in the mud flats at Coconut Wells, a short drive north of the tourist town. Zane was travelling with a mate of his, and the two became separated after they walked to a nearby residence to ask for water. Police have searched extensively for Zane, but have found nothing. The father of one was also in a relationship with his partner, and it would suggest that wandering off can be ruled out of his disappearance. The family of Zane Stevens say they think someone in the town of Roebourne knows something, but did not elaborate as to what. 5 days later, another man went missing from Geraldton, 37-year-old Brenton Shah, on May the 1st, 2024. Brenton lived further south than the other men in Geraldton. He was last seen at the town's marina, and a police search later uncovered a pair of shorts with matches to his DNA. Brenton is described by his family as kind, warm-hearted, and likely to get along with everyone. His disappearance is highly unusual considering he wasn't really in the outback per se, and it's not as if he wandered off into the desert. So, where are these men? Some have alluded to possible connections with a drug syndicate and a booming meth trade in Northwest. I couldn't find any information on that other than a single paragraph in an article, so I can't comment on how likely that is. The families of the missing men want answers and have even taken it to the top. A conglomerate of mothers and aunties from the remote Aboriginal communities in Western Australia have travelled to Canberra to ask for action from the federal government and was supported by the Aboriginal Tent Embassy. The group is calling for a royal commission, a police task force, changes to the Western Australian legislation around the classification of a missing person to a suspicious disappearance after a month, and for the Western Australia government to offer a reward of $1 million each for each of the 6 missing Indigenous men. To date, these families are still without any answers to their missing loved ones. A missing persons case that in recent years has dominated the podcast and media world is the strange mystery surrounding the small outback town of Larrimah and its missing resident, Patrick or Paddy Moriarty. On the 16th of December 2017, 70-year-old Paddy was last seen drinking at the local watering hole, the Pink Panther Hotel. After this, he got on his quad bike with his dog Kelly, drove some 800 metres and vanished. When Moriarty did not appear the next day, locals suspected something had happened, but several days passed before he was reported as missing to the nearest police station, 70 kilometres away. A massive search and investigation followed, but neither Paddy nor his beloved dog were ever found. Early on, police have suspected that foul play was at hand. It is believed he returned home as his hat, wallet and keys were there, and his dog's food was half-eaten. The case sparked a lot of interest from the media and inspired a book, a documentary, a podcast, and a fictional dramatization. Most seem to point out the ongoing feuds in the town, one in particular between Paddy and his neighbour, pie shop owner Fran Hodgetts. Paddy was described as a larrikin, and if you're from a different part of the world and don't have that saying, it basically means cheeky or mischievous, but with a good heart. Kind of like a joker. Despite this, he was known to be a bit of a drama queen, constantly getting into arguments and rubbing people up the wrong way, or being in the midst of a feud was not uncommon for the grinning, weather-beaten, beer-drinking outback bloke.
What do you like about living here in this place?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I don't mind it. Good. Yeah. I'll come up to the pub here and have a good drinks and everything like that, meet Barry, all the locals, well, I won't say too much about everyone, but,
Oh, well, let's talk about that a bit. How does everyone get on in this little town?
they don't. No.
Originally from Ireland, Moriarty immigrated to Australia when he was 19, worked a few jobs here and there, and eventually bought a disused servo, or service station if you're foreign, in Larrimah in 2010 for a reported $30,000. Fran Hodgetts was the pie shop owner, and her live-in gardener, Owen Laurie, had historical gripes with their neighbours' aggressive antics. There were poisoned garden beds, dead kangaroo corpses thrown over their fence, and harsh words shared. However, the pair have always vehemently denied their involvement in the disappearance. Enough motive for murder? Who knows? Speculations around Paddy and his dog being chopped up and baked into Fran's pies. There was also a rumour about his remains being fed to a resident's one-eyed pet croc. In a two-part coronial inquest in 2018 and 2022, police played an audio clip which detectives alleged was of Owen Laurie, singing of how he killerated Paddy with a clawhammer. Laurie denied it was him singing on the secretly recorded tapes. Coroner Greg Kavanagh handed down inquest findings on Moriarty and his dog's suspected deaths. He concluded that Moriarty was likely killed on the 16th of December 2017, but his cause of death could not be determined. Kavanagh established Moriarty was, quote, killed in the context of and likely due to the ongoing feud he had with his nearest neighbours, end quote. Northern Territory legislation does not allow Kavanagh to include a finding or comment that a person may be guilty, but he did say, however, I will refer the investigation to the Commissioner of Police and the DPP. Investigations into the suspected death of Moriarty continue, and the $250,000 reward for information remains open. The Outback can be a strange and mysterious place full of interesting characters, much like the aforementioned Paddy Moriarty. More recently, the unforgiving environment may have claimed another soul, or perhaps it was something more sinister. A young mum is missing in the Outback after multiple carloads of gangsters reportedly ran her car off the road before chasing her and her boyfriend into the dark central Australian desert at night while shooting at them. That was reported by Jake Jefferson Peters, who claims this happened immediately before his girlfriend Angie Fuller vanished without a trace into the arid desert outside of Alice Springs in the early hours of January the 10th, 2023. Police may believe otherwise. 30-year-old mother of two, Angie Fuller, had recently moved to Alice Springs from Darwin, and on the evening of Monday the 9th of January, she and a friend drove back into town after visiting Darwin for a short visit and parted ways soon after. According to an article on The Nightly, it states that Detective Sergeant Ashley Dudson, who is currently in charge of the Major Crime Squad, says Miss Fuller was last seen at 6:40 p.m. that night at a truck stop north of Alice Springs. This was the last independent sighting we have, Sergeant Dudson said. She was with her boyfriend. We know that from CCTV. The next day, her abandoned Toyota Corolla is found on the side of Tanami Road, about 15 kilometers west of the Stewart Highway intersection. 48 hours later, on January the 11th, Angie's boyfriend, Jake Peters, reports her missing to the police. A 15-day search for Angie was conducted by Northern Territory Police, who flew in from all over the territory. They scoured some 400 square kilometers of harsh terrain, but the missing 48 hours may have hindered their search and any potential clues. What's odd about this is the boyfriend's action during the search. He reportedly argued with searchers and police at search sites and protested against his car being searched. Not only that, but the bloke decided to upload videos to his social media accounts detailing his version of events. Now, I think these videos have been taken down because I couldn't find them anywhere, but if someone knows where they are, please let us know in the comments. In a series of videos, the 26-year-old recorded, quote, "for my legal purposes." A police officer is heard explaining to Mr. Peters why his car was searched, while he protests that zip ties and green string are found in his car are, quote, "not mine." One longer video, he allegedly tells us in detail what happened, and this is the transcript. 4 nights ago, me and my girlfriend got ran off the road, and then we got shot at by a gang. And then it just multiplied. More carloads were just rocking up, like, hectically. We had a 10-minute brief to try and get the car out of, being bogged, but whatever. Anyways, they, rocked up and just started shooting. I mean, more cars were just coming in like, what the F? He goes on to say that the pair became separated during the commotion and that they both ran on foot in the pitch black in the desert night. He then says he heard Angie scream, and when he ran to the spot where the sounds came from, there was no one there. After this, Jake Peters climbs a small hill and claims he was close to home. In fact, so close to home, it would only take a 15-minute walk to his house. So why did he take 48 hours to report his girlfriend missing? It's not like he was lost. Interestingly, the police have somewhat, or at least partly, corroborated this story. Miss Fuller was likely driving her red Toyota Corolla with Mr. Peters in the passenger seat when it came into contact with an unrelated vehicle on the Tanami Road in the early hours of January 10. Police have spoken to the occupants of the other vehicle and deduced that there was an interaction between the two parties. The investigators are also looking at another two vehicles in relation to Angie's disappearance, a 1986 camouflage Daihatsu Rocky with a rear canopy removed and no registration plates, and Mr. Peters' 1998 silver Nissan Pulsar sedan. It is believed that Peters had access to both of these vehicles. Not long after Angie went missing, Jake Peters then flees to Queensland where he gets arrested for an alleged violent carjacking. The search continues for 30-year-old mother of two, Angie Fuller, and while police have only found one of her possessions, a secondary mobile phone, there has been very little other evidence. They do believe it was foul play, and it's likely that more than one person was involved. A $250,000 reward was posted in October 2024 for any information on her whereabouts. If you or someone you know has any information on any of the cases that I've talked about today, please call Crime Stoppers anonymously or get in contact with your local police. And that is today's episode on the mysterious disappearances of the Outback. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, give us a like, subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you here next time in the shadows.